Hello everyone, this is DJ,
And this is Amiel.
and this is CG Talks, the podcast where CG guys talk about CG. And you guys, if you have been listening to the podcast, you're maybe wondering why is not Marco with us and Andrew? And that's because of some unfortunate events, because Andrew sadly got COVID. Well, right now he's already recovering, so no worries, guys, but he had to miss this episode. And Marco is kind of like also hit by ricochet with the COVID thing, but not him directly, but his internet connection, because he's moving and the company that was supposed to connect the internet to his new place, they have also this excuse of a COVID thing, and generally he's offline, so taking a digital detox for the time being. But right now we have a special guest and a colleague, Amiel, that already introduced himself in the beginning, and maybe right now, Amiel, you will say a few words about yourself and why you joined the podcast today.
Cool. So, hey guys, my name is Amiel, and I'm a content creator for GarageFarm.net Academy. I used to work for 3DB. I used to make assets for the 3DB asset library, but then I got shifted over here, and I'm in charge of all the substance-related content on the channel. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. And today we kind of thought about a nice introductory topic for you, Amiel, so that we're going to speak about, well, I call it generations in 3D industry, because me, Andrew, and Marco, so to speak, we are kind of like a little bit of veterans, maybe not super hardcore veterans, but we have some years working in the industry already. And you, Amiel, are more representative of the younger generation joining 3D nowadays. And so that's going to be the topic, like what are the experiences of today's artists joining the 3D industry, and what were the historical, maybe our personal, like my personal experiences with starting to learn 3D, and probably, as usually, we're going to just digress to some more common topic, right? More current ones as well.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you actually, like, what was 3D like back then? Like, what can you start off with? How did you learn 3D, and what was it like learning it back then? Your history, like.
Yeah. Well, I've really kind of joined the 3D wagon quite late, because it was like the end of my, so to speak, the end of my higher education. So it was around, I think, 2008 or something like that, like the more serious takes on that, because before that I had like brief contacts with 3D. Of course, like all people, like I knew 3D from the games, stuff like that, maybe movies, but I didn't really touch anything on it. Like I mostly, if I designed something with the computer, it was like 2D graphics, simple stuff. And the first thing, I think, as I recall, the first thing was SketchUp, and Google introduced SketchUp. And I was studying interior design, and we needed a simple tool for getting the shapes and simple visualizations for our projects. And I think like SketchUp was one of the easiest things to jump in, because it just had this super easy learning curve. Just started the software and extruding and doing simple shapes. It was very, very intuitive and simple. And then later on, I discovered Blender, and I did it while I was already working for a company that was designing trade fair booths. So it's kind of like exhibition design, and I needed some software for visualization, so I picked Blender because it was free. So it was like mostly it was free. It was available, and I started learning it. Like somewhere on my disk I still have one of these first renders,
Mm-hmm.
which are these. It's none of these super fancy renders
Yeah.
which people show on forums. This is my first artwork in 3D. Now it's just
Mm-hmm.
crap, right? It's just crap. So
Yeah.
the real first renders in 3D. And the learning thing was like there was some amount of knowledge online to be found, like
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of tutorials back then, but it was nothing like today, when you just start YouTube, type in the search for any topic, and you just get simple and cool tutorials. Well, maybe not all of them are super good, but mostly you can find answers to like at least basic questions very easily, or you can buy a course right now, right? But then I remember I even bought a book about Blender, right? That right now I think like most people just think that buying a book on 3D software, that's ancient, right?
That's ancient stuff, man.
Yeah, I remember, and I still have it somewhere on my shelf.
Like,
it's
what did
funny
you start
because
out with? Like, what Blender version? Like, yeah, if you had a book, that means it was only specific to a specific version, right?
Yeah, it was like 2.49. I think that was my first Blender version. So it was like this one before the 2.5 upgrade. So the one with those strange buttons on the lower part of the screen, and all of all of the weirdness, right?
Yeah.
But I found like some things were working back then that later on stopped working that well. Like for example, like DXF import. For a long time, I used the 2.49 version because there was a good importer for DXF, like files from CAD, and I just learned the basics, right? The first, I remember that there were some techniques that are no longer used, like radiosity explained in the book, and like different stuff which is right now so different, and so much simpler than back then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any simpler counts today, because when I first started out, everything, okay, maybe my side was opposite. Like, if you had to go through books and there was some knowledge but not much, I had a ton to go through. And as a beginner, it's like it's like opening the floodgates. Like, okay, cool, I can learn character art, I can make a table, I can make VFX. Holy crap, there's so much to learn. And when I started out doing 3D, that's what I thought I had to do. I thought I had to finish every single course known to man just to get a job or get any good at it. And then I wanted to make 3D for games. I wanted to get into the game industry, but every time I learned something, it just felt nothing added up, right? So yeah, it's interesting hearing it from your side, where it almost sounds like a barren wasteland where you had to go through like books. And for me, I had everything at my fingertips, but it's like, crap, where do I start?
The curse of plenty, right?
Because,
so
you never learned from like school, for example, like you were never taught to a curriculum.
Well, I had a little bit of training at school. At the university, we had a short, like it was not like even a full course, but a short introduction to 3ds Max back then.
Yeah.
So that was my first encounter with 3ds Max. But later on, I just didn't use it for a long time. And I found SketchUp. It was accessible. It was easy. It was enough for that time being. And then later, I found Blender to be useful for my needs. I use it even for my final work for the university. So for my master's degree, I did some simple visualization. Then, well, right now, if I look at them, they were really pretty basic, but it was enough for that time. I didn't yet aim for any super photorealistic result. It was just, a tool to just sell the idea of the design.
Yeah.
So, and generally, I've had the history of like doing design, and the 3D was just like a tool for that aim. And slowly I was drifting towards ArcViz artist workflow. So for some big time of my career, I was doing other stuff and doing 3D as a kind of supplementary tool. But slowly I came to to realize that I really love this part of my work, and I started to focus on it more and learn more and be better at this. So
talking about photorealism, how did you start out texturing your stuff before? Because you came from a time where photorealism meant, it was much harder to do it before compared to nowadays, where we have ray tracing, we have filmic, we have PBR textures. What was it like before, where you didn't have any of those? Where did you even get your textures, for example?
Yeah, I remember that, sometimes I used to just search online for images, and I remember like first starting out with SketchUp, that the idea of texturing that I had was just like an image of some surface, which was like pre-made, just a photo of a texture, so to speak. So like wood textures were available, I don't know, plaster textures and stuff, but none of the things that are right now building the whole layered texture sets of the PBR workflow, which give you like the full spectrum of surface qualities. Then I just worried about stretching and scaling the texture right, and not about all the other things like reflectiveness and bump and stuff like that. These were like out of my spectrum of thinking, really.
Yeah.
And I remember when I started Blender, it didn't yet have even cycles, right? The cycles was introduced later.
Blender render.
Yeah, just internal render.
Yeah.
So it was looking like crap, and it was already times where professional ArcViz people were using V-Ray in 3ds Max, and V-Ray was quite ahead at that time.
Yeah.
So I was kind of jealous of the results available then. Right now it's like the gap it closed very much. So you can, once you know what you're doing in Blender, you can really get nice results.
Yeah, but it honestly sucked, man. Like I when I watched tutorials, learning stuff, obviously you'd learn about texturing stuff, right? Like using normal maps, using base color, diffuse, and I was so confused. Like I'd watch like older tutorials from like 2013 or 2012 or whatever, and they'd be like, connect the bump map. What the hell is a bump map? And it's like, oh, it's like an earlier normal map. What the hell is that? Like, what's a spec gloss workflow? Like, there are so many things, I think, from your end that really did not make any sense. And studying PBR, it's so easy, so much easier.
It seems like once you get into 3D, it's it seems like it should be that easy, and you have to understand a lot of things about it's kind of like arcane, almost scientific knowledge that you have to adapt to be really thinking about it, right? Like, because this is like virtually simulating like pretty complicated phenomenons. Like I think the whole industry is going to the direction where you will not have to really consider all of that stuff if you don't want to, right? It's just like low level programming or something like that. If you don't want to get like super optimized on stuff, you can just do stuff with high level, I don't know, scripting or whatever. For most stuff that regular people need, it's enough, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's going into that direction, that the ease of use will take over. Like recently I've seen the latest Cinema 4D launching video for the new release of Cinema 4D, and like all of the features that they introduced, like there was no really like huge technical advancements there. Like almost all of these things that were shown were kind of like usability improvements in, like, so to speak, placing elements easily, aligning them, just like things that make you just focus on the creative work and not worry about these technical details. That was kind of like the big deal when I started 3D. Like almost all of the 3D world, like at least the professional thing, it was about knowing what buttons to push, what secret values to put into a shader. People were kind of like sharing those secrets, secret formulas for the perfect photorealistic, I don't know, metals or glass or the correct IOR values and stuff like that. And this was like this little arcane knowledge, which right now is just like mostly done by some preset or whatever, because the libraries are growing and people are getting lazy because of that also. So that they don't have to understand it. They don't have to dig into the physics background of this and the computer part, which is also kind of like a big deal. So that was kind of like the beauty and curse of the early days of that industry, that you really had to go deep to understand it. But right now it's so much more artist oriented than a technical. But probably there will be both of these to some extent.
Starting out, I hated that stuff. Like, PBR, when you get down to it, it's dumbed down texturing basically. You have what's roughness, you have metal. Is it a metal? Is it not metal? Is it rough? Is it not rough? It's 0 to 1. It's binary. It makes it's super easy to get into. And then I got into fixing stuff for 3DP, and I'd have to make shaders for V-Ray, and I'd have to mess around with IOR values, and I'm like, what the hell? So I searched on Google, what the hell is an IOR value? And I'd find like these long tables full of like, if it's a water, it has an IOR value of this. Oh, if it's a glass, is it frosted glass? If it's frosted glass, it has an IOR value of this. Like, Jesus Christ, guys, why are you use PBR? But then it's weird because I feel
but that's kind of like always simplifying stuff, because if you take a deeper thought about this, you're kind of designing shaders for surfaces. And the 3D is like about surfaces and about volumes at the same time. Like there, this is all physics transferred to the computer calculations, and that hidden, secret numbers. These are all related to some physical phenomenons, which are really fascinating to think about once you get into it. But they can be really daunting, because it's not. It seems like rocket science sometimes, but it's not that complicated. Unless you go to a molecular level, probably.
I hope we never have to go that deep, because that sounds like a technical nightmare. I mean, that's why we became artists, right? To avoid the math, right?
Yeah. We all use the cell phones, but none of us really wonders what does it have to do with with quantum theory or stuff like that. But it has.
There's a reason we like smartphones. It's because it makes everything easy. We're dumb people. We like things easy. But getting back to the whole texturing thing, like, what was it like? When you started out, you had to learn all that IOR stuff, specular workflow, I guess. I'm not sure what you call it. And then, literally, like, overnight, PBR comes in. Like, oh, by the way, everything's gonna be PBR now. Substance came in, we do PBR. Quixel came in, we do PBR. What was it like having to? Was it hard for you to adapt, or is it like muscle memory where you were so much more comfortable with the old workflow? What was it like for you?
I think I'm kind of like gradually adapted it. I didn't. Maybe it's because I wasn't really very strictly tied to a specific pipeline, like working for a very long time for a studio that has like a set workflow and just constantly repeating the same stuff. I was like almost, because I was freelancing and I was doing like very different stuff. Like I was designing, I was learning 3D at the side for some jobs, and I was always like, throughout my career, I was always learning new stuff. Like I found a job in an architectural studio where I had to learn Revit, for example. Like it was a very short period. It didn't work out well, but I had like a 3-month digging into Revit, and then I really got the basics pretty fast, and that maybe that was kind of my unique experience of like constantly learning, which I think in the end it was good. Like maybe I didn't advance as quickly in the 3D abilities like as people at my age, for example. Some of them were really better 3D artists at the same time, but I had this opportunity of really checking out very different stuff. Like I learned Rhino for one job I did, like the modeling in NURBS. So I kind of have this wide spectrum of what's possible in 3D. What are the different techniques? Yeah, so kind of like the generalist mindset. Like you have to learn everything about everything, but not yeah, maybe not super deep about anything. But that's why I probably just accepted the appearance of new technology, like new workflow with the PBR textures, and also because I was a Blender user, I think it was easier for me because Cycles quite quickly adapted the Disney principled shader. So while I was like kind of adapting Cycles into my workflow, I already started learning about PBR and stuff. So it wasn't like a big shock for me, at least.
Talking about your jobs though, like, I mean, I think we all love to talk about like our career trajectory. Like, oh yeah, I started out with this. Yeah, I immediately started making like professional work. What was your experience like back then? Like when with your first creation, for example, what was it? What's the first thing you made where you were like, oh, I made a 3D thing that isn't the default cube? Because when I started out, I was learning 3D. I've only ever touched 3D once in college, and it was back. They were using Maya, and I had no idea what the hell this was. I was like, what the hell is Maya? So I click on it, and obviously, you see a default cube, and I'm like, huh, that's a 3D object. I'm gonna do something. So I get a sphere, I get another sphere, and I get a cylinder. And like any other immature college kid, I make like a small dick, and then I slap it on like a 3D asset of a centaur from online. I just slap it on. So I was wondering, like, what was your experience with 3D? Like, 'cause I think when I started out with Maya, it was intuitive to a point where even a complete beginner could like slap on something and call it a day. How was it like back then with you?
I remember, well, maybe because I didn't learn 3D as a kid, so to speak. Like, I remember, when I was a kid and I was interested in the 3D graphics because of the games, and and this was like the even more ancient times of the 8-bit computers, which was my first computer, the ZX Spectrum, and I remember the times of the cassette tapes and stuff. So,
what's a cassette tape?
Yeah, feeling a dinosaur, really. But this was this magnetic tape in a small plastic box that you use for recording music and also computer programs. Really, they were recorded on that, and there was a nice screechy sound that they made while reading into the memory of the computer.
That sounds demonic.
Yeah, it was, and it was like hellish because sometimes you waited for 10-15 minutes for the program to load, and it crashed at the end. So maybe that was like a good learning experience for the later waiting for the render to finish and then it crashes, right? So 3D patience, learning patience for the computers, right? But well, I digressed, and I was about to say about what was my first 3D creation, right? So I started learning this pretty late and strictly for a specific purpose. So it was like interior design and interior visualization. So I think that the first, at least, I don't recall if I made something before that, but it was like the interior, trying interiors and the work I was doing on for my school. So so like furniture and stuff, and I was already learning modeling like in the edit mode, I think, in Blender, because it was I had the plane, and I started off with the plane and then extruded some stuff and made the walls, or a cube, scaled it,
Mm-hmm.
and made openings to make a room and stuff like that. Yeah, now of course, like the shapes were awful when I made my first concept design of a room. I just extruded every furniture that was kind of like a stable piece, and the texturing was not even the case. I just applied some basic colors and found how to add the lights into that, how to place a camera, and of course I just put the camera inside the room and then blew up the angle of the camera so that I could get a. So the first mistake of the super wide angle cameras inside the room. Yeah, so the perspective lines were all distorted and stuff. So that was kind of like my first experience with 3D. Yeah.
Wow, so professional.
No sensors and no car models. I didn't start. Well, I started with with interior and also like trade booth designs. So I remember I made a counter for some shop or something like that. So like simple furniture designs. Yeah, I think that was.
Yeah, I mean, I started out wanting to create characters. So when I started doing 3D, I was watching like all these character artist tutorials. And then I realized, wow, I suck at making characters. I'm gonna go make furniture instead. And make a table.
I think it's easier, the learning curve. I think that, so I was kind of lucky starting off with this interior, because like 3D for the most part, for 3D artists, like doing ArcViz is not like a full-fledged 3D generalist workflow, because you have to learn like the basics, really, how to prepare the room. Maybe the lighting is a little bit more tricky, but then for the most part you use other people's models. You just import from some kind of a library. You just import this into the scene, lay it out. So and then you maybe have to dig into the texturing. But if the models that you have are pre-made and well done and with textures, you just have to know where to plug them in. And so it's easier, definitely, than for an organic character creation where you have to, I don't know, learn sculpting and then retopo and stuff. Oh my god, that's a harder thing to do.
Hey man, making furniture as a beginner is not easy. I remember trying to make like a basic ass table with like 4 legs and a top. It took me a week, and it wasn't even the right scale, because I had no idea scale was a thing in Blender. Like I thought I had to like resize it manually. And it was terrible. Like first Centaur.
So I have a bias here, because I first learned to design furniture kind of by hand at school. And we had some we were taught to build them in a mill shop. So we were cutting the wood and making a chair for like the first assignment of a real furniture design. It was like making a chair, and we were drawing them. We were drawing them on like in 1:1 scale on big sheets of paper, and then trying to build them in the shop and make a prototype, experiment with stuff. So generally, that was easier for me to understand the design. And the first thing in computer aided design, it was not 3D for me, but it was like the drafting in CAD, I think. So that's an easier transition if you know how to build a design in 2D and relate it to a 3D object. That's already giving a big advantage, because the 3D then is just like it seems easier, than it's just like we talked with Heavy Poly on the podcast. He said like he really appreciated 3D because of this, not having to do planar drawings and imagine how it translates to 3D. So having this mind trick of relating the 3D object to a 2D drawings, like which is kind of hard, and making this by hand without a computer is even harder. And so then when you build the stuff in 3D, it's kind of like it's easier.
Yeah, it is. But I don't know. Well, I wouldn't say it's easier, because I think it really depends on what fundamental knowledge you have on art anyway. If you're good at art to begin with, 3D is probably going to be easier to get your mind around. But then starting out as somebody who could barely draw like stick figures, and now going into 3D, thinking I was gonna be a hot shot, and then boom, I'm making furniture, and this stuff is still hard. I don't know, to each their own, I guess. But
Yeah.
hearing you like plug in textures, right? What? Because I'm the substance guy, right, in the channel. I'm not even that good at substance, but I am the substance guy. And I grew up in 3D knowing how to be doing procedural stuff, right? And yeah, what was it like in your and like if you got a texture of a wood from online and you wanted to like change it up, like how did you get around that? What was it like back then?
Well, I mostly used GIMP for that, or
GIMP.
people use Photoshop. Yeah, I was using GIMP at that time. Generally, the big thing was like to make the texture seamless, right? It was like, a big thing, and there were plugins for that. But mostly, comparing it to nowadays standards, it used to suck, and it was hard getting rid of the tiling effect if you had a bigger area to cover with the texture, so you had to revert to some tricks or just deal with it. Like I remember, for example, like one of my first animations, like it was like one of the first serious ArcViz jobs, so to speak. Like I build a whole model of a quite big building, an apartment building for a real estate developer. So they were happy with the model. Okay, I did some still shots, and then I was making an animation. Ooh, and I was doing that on a poor laptop. So I remember the frustrations of the hardware limitations, the crashing of. I had to really learn to optimize fast.
Yeah.
So things, and then I've applied some textures to the ground. I think to the grass. It was tiling as hell, and I've said something like wrong. So in the end animation, there was some kind of like parallax effect of the texture not following the camera movement or stuff like that. Some strange things started happening. Yeah, so I wasn't like super happy with the result. Yeah, so I was learning the hard way, along the way when I was trying to achieve get some stuff done, right?
Yeah.
So right now you have to, I think right now I just would revert to more tutorials or checking how to do stuff properly before I even, started the job, or at least at the first stage. But then I remember it was like close to the deadline, and then you have to experiment with some stuff like so.
Yeah.
It was sometimes hard, right? But
yeah. Honestly, sounds super sketchy because if we're going by what you said, where you would get your textures from Google, or for example, and then you change it up in GIMP. Like, what's the legality of doing that? Because when doing a Substance, you can do everything you ever need with just all the tools inside Substance, right? So everything you texture and create, it's owned by you, right? Everything you make is completely on you. But then what was it like working on like for say commercial projects, and then you'd be using textures from like online, and then changing them up a bit? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, I remember that sometimes it was like I was sometimes probably like on the gray line somewhere. A lot of times, like back then, it was not like the age of everything online back then, but it was already like the internet was available, and a lot of stuff was well, it was starting to grow. The libraries of free images as well. There were some available already, but sometimes you took your own photos as well. Yeah, I learned to do that as well.
Old school photogrammetry without the photogrammetry.
Yeah, it was without the grammetry. It's just taking photo textures, right? But right now, right now you just have so much more tools. You can even do like, it's not that hard to make your own HDRI or whatever you need. You just need some equipment and a little bit of knowledge, right? Or a program that does it for you, which some of them are really even free for photogrammetry or for texture stitching. And then you have Substance, and stuff alike. like mixer or armor paint as well. Yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly spoiled for choice as I guess a modern artist. Like, I never had to deal with all of that stuff. You just get a substance material, slap it on, call it a day. Oh, you don't have anything? Go to substance source. Oh, you wanna like make something cool without really putting in work? Slap on a smart material. Like, 3D is so much more acceptable. Or yeah, oh, I don't know what's the right word for it? More acceptable or for modern day artists? Because it sounds brutal from it honestly sounds brutal from your
it
time.
was it was hard, but then the expectations were a little bit lower than today. Right now, the level of quality
Yeah.
that's expected from you is much higher, also because so much things are at hand. You
Yeah.
can like pretty easily get even if you don't use Substance, you can download free high quality textures or models from a lot of places. Like commercial stuff, commercial companies just give some freebies, and there are also these open source nice initiatives like CC0 Textures and Texture Haven.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot to be used for free, and if you want to go further, you can pay like a small fee for a subscription of some sort, and go pro very cheaply. I think it's generally for the good. We could call it like being spoiled, but then again, you just have so much so much in your toolbox right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that it's good, even from my perspective. Like I remember that it was harder back then. Learning to well, maybe it it forced you to work cleverly, or to dig into some topics like you said, like these scientific things about why things work that way, which you don't have to dig into right now.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, you can just create so much more in a shorter amount of time, or just aim higher in your expectations. Like I can't imagine doing like there's a director here in Poland, which was a 3D artist back in the days, like a solo 3D artist using 3ds Max. I think he made a rewarded animation which was called The Cathedral. His name's
Mm-hmm.
Tomasz Bagiński. He's
Yeah.
right now he's leading one of the top studios in Poland right now, and they were doing, for example, they were co-producing the Witcher for Netflix, the series.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, they're doing top high end animations and VFX and stuff. And the guy did this first animation, which is like it's quite amazing, right? Even now to watch. Like, of course, it's kind of outdated because of the technology, and but it was like kind of quite ambitious vision, and he like did it for a few years. I don't know how long, but pretty long, and he did it on his own. But that was like kind of like very unique experience that the guys had this the guts to do that and to pull it off and finish, and that really brought him success and fame back then. And then he launched his career from that point. But now it's just like it's really achievable, right? If you want to make a short movie or something like that, it's so much easier than back then to do something like that.
Yeah, yeah. The barrier for entry to make amazing stuff is just much lower, I guess, today. But the expectations are way higher because it's lower. Like before, it was much harder to get into 3D because you had no idea what the hell was happening. You have to buy books. Like, what the hell? Books? Who uses books? And then you'd have to create your renders, and people would forgive you, right? Because you're not a pro at it. You're not working in a studio. You're learning from a book. You're not gonna be making anything big. But because everything is so much more advanced, but at the same time intuitive, if I wanted to make a film with like using Blender for CG, it would have to be like seriously good so that people don't make fun of it.
Yeah, maybe so, but then again, it turns out that the tool barrier is getting lower anyway, so that you don't have to spend so much time learning, and I see it, for example, from some young artists which are starting off their careers and advancing very fast and doing like stuff like they're quickly outgrowing even the veterans of the field, like in terms of the effect, because the learning curve of the tool itself is easier, and some young talents have can easier put their artistic talent to fruition, so to speak, like, because it's creating art is more about what you are doing and how you are doing it. Like, I believe that's the more important part. If you like watch a movie and it's a low budget movie, but it's done by a talented director, and the crew is good and the actors are okay, it's going to be a good movie. And you can watch a Hollywood blockbuster with a big budget and 3D VFX, and it can be a crap movie, even if everything's blowing up on the screen and the graphics are super high end, and still it can be a very bad movie and really boring to watch, or I don't know.
Yeah, of course.
The cinematographical value is low. And that's because, that's I think the benefit of this time, because the expectations are high, but also the tools are there. So if you are really creative and you know what to do, and like what you want to convey, you can do that easier. Of course, you can do it with 3D or other mediums, right? It's like, for example, me and Marco, we dig into musicals. Also, we had some musical experiences creating, and the thing is that right now you can kind of record at the quality which was available just for the top artists, like in the 60s. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that there are there are just benefits of that, because some things are just like so tempting and easy, like using autotune for singing or stuff like that. So sometimes it's just killing the creative part, right? Just focusing on the technical part and not on the artistic part of the music. But generally you can like record a pretty dope quality recording in your home studio right now without spending like millions of dollars for the equipment. You can just have to have a decent mic and a computer, and you're free to go, right? And you can create whatever you want. So that's kind of like amazing times, right? And I've heard that from like old time musicians, which are also kind of excited about that time that this really changed.
Yeah. So going back to 3D though, I think being creative isn't all that we have to do. Like, I think people get focused on the creative side, like, oh, I want to like make this pretty character, I want to make this pretty visualization or this pretty asset or whatever, but because of the lower barrier for entry for tools, people forget about the technical side. Like, okay, why do we do stuff like this? Why do we care about topology? Why care about proper UV unwrapping, for example? Like the boring stuff that nobody really wants to get into, especially for beginners. But I think it's important. Like, when you create an asset, for example, I think a lot of visualization people would fall back to modifiers, right? Oh, let's get this thing, slap a modifier on it, do this, and that, boom, it looks good. And then compare it to somebody who spent the time to really make it optimized and, maxed out the textures here. It performs better. Like from the video game industry, there's so many games out there that are really pretty, but they run like terrible. Like, I think you probably heard about the whole Cyberpunk 2077 scandal, right? Where it's been hyped for years. People have been working for a long time, and it looks amazing, but it won't work on anything. It's so technically heavy that it's a terrible thing to run, right? Compared to like
I've heard like it was really really bad on a PS like PlayStation 4. That was a horror. Like the PC guys generally were kind of satisfied. Like
depends on the PC. Like, the guys who were happy with it were running like RTX 3090s. Like they're perfectly fine with it, But then maybe you with like a 1050 Ti, you could probably play GTA 5 on your PC, but you try running Cyberpunk, that thing will kill your computer, right? Like, but it shouldn't, because and I feel like that's a thing that gets overlooked a lot. Like, I prefer thinking of the technical side because I really suck at the creative side. And yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I think there's a time and place for each skill, and being creative isn't all, and shouldn't
of
be the
course.
only focus.
And it's kind of like the two legs of the same person. So because like if you make the movies, you need to be you need to be creative, and the director is very important, right? He has to have the vision, has to lead the team, and put out the imagery. But then again, if you want to make a really pro high-end movie, you really need this guy behind the camera, right? The operator. And he has to know his craft, right? It's not just about having an eye for a nice shot, but he has to know about the lenses, about everything, just to make the shot exactly the way that it should look. And then you have the post-production guys and stuff. Like there's always the technical side as well. For example, like you want it to be a painter, right? You want to do the creative stuff, but you need this guy who makes the paint, right? He has to know that the paint will be right and that it will dry. Oh, okay, man. A lot of technical stuff in all artistic endeavors, right?
Yeah. Although, speaking of like directors, creative vision, and the technical side, I think a perfect example of that in recent memory would be just the whole Justice League thing, right? Where when they first created the Justice League back in 2017, Zack Snyder got fired. So Joss Whedon, the director of Avengers 1, came in to finish the film. And then, so you have the original director kicked out of his own film because of personal reasons, and someone else takes over, and everything is a mess. So I don't know if you know the story, but Zack Snyder was the original director, and he had his original vision for the film. He wanted to finish it, and he had VFX ready. Like, he would concept out the storyboards, the designs. He would be work, and the main villain in the movie was this like hulking metallic figure. Like, to a PBR artist or to a VFX artist, metal is like the easiest thing to figure out, right? Because like, oh, it's shiny, it's a metal, boom, it looks good, it's easy to make look good with the right HDR. And then but Joss Whedon comes in. Not only does he make the film much worse from a creative standpoint, like the writing is terrible, the plot's terrible. Now the VFX artists who worked on it had to redesign the certain parts, like the main villain. So instead of this hulking monster with like spikes made out of metal, it was this really old looking, almost pedophile looking guy in like a helmet. And it looked terrible. Like, it looked really fake from a VFX standpoint. And it's interesting because when Zack Snyder came back to finish the Justice League for HBO Max, everyone could see the difference, right? The VFX is so much better because they really thought it out according to his vision as a director. So yeah, there's something to be said about times where the director's creative vision, whether you're an art director, a creative director, or a movie director, whatever, is perfectly in sync with the technical side, you have amazing results, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what Heavy Poly Vaughn said about the experience with Alberto Mielgo and the Spider-Verse movie. There was this synergy between artist, director, and everyone like kind of followed the same vision and had like all the guys in the whole team had kind of like a lot of artistic freedom, but they were kind of also on the same wavelength in terms of what they were aiming for. A lot of room for experimentation, but at the same time, it was kind of like strapped into the vision of the director. And I'm a very big fan of this one, like
the Spider-Verse.
The Spider-Verse, yeah, I think it was like one of the freshest things that I've seen in last year's animation. So
yeah, it's really interesting because even the way it looks, right? Like, these are the same guys who worked on the Emoji Movie. So you first hear about Spider-Verse. Oh God, the same guys who made the Emoji Movie made Spider-Verse, and then you see
Mm-hmm.
it, and your mind's blown. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna, my mind is on overdrive right now from how beautiful this film is. And I remember watching a behind the scenes video on it, and there was this scene where Miles was like falling, and then it was it's what's up danger scene, and the city had like this weird FOV almost. At least it looked like FOV. But then when they got to the behind the scenes, it wasn't actually the camera. All the buildings were kind of pointing towards, and like it wasn't like a real building where everything was like from the ground up. It was all like distorted, like the buildings were like shaped towards the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's one of those things where if you have the right people on board, the right who can do the technical side, like even the shaders, you achieve a result that is just mind blowing. It like changes the game. Like everybody's
Yeah.
inspired, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that this kind of falls into our new venture of the cabin project that we're working on right now.
Yeah.
So just like a little spoiler for what's coming to the GF
Yeah.
Academy, but yeah, we're working on a bigger project and a team-based project right now. So I'm hoping that these kind of inspiring things that we were talking about in the podcast, this will kind of become our experience as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Definitely.
I guess we're kind of like closing to an hour, so maybe, and I think we digressed a bit into
Mm-hmm.
different topics, and still talking about generational experiences in 3D. How would how would you think, like, is it easier right now to become a 3D artist? Or like, do you feel that uh, the world's the world's your oyster, so to speak? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can just do whatever you want, or do you feel that that maybe it would be better to be, like some people
Go to an
think,
office job or something.
some people have this sentiment, I wish I would have, I was born, in the 60s, right, when the music were
Oh, I was
hip
born in
or
the
something
wrong
like that.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Or do you feel that, oh my goodness, like, these times are so exciting, I'm really glad to be joining this industry
Mm-hmm.
right now and not 10 years ago or 20 years ago?
Yeah. I mean, art is pretty much similar to how athletes are, right? Where just naturally over time, each generation of athletes, artists, whatever, they're all going to be way better than the last generation. So going into the industry as a younger artist, it's so much easier to get into, and but at the same time, all the competition is so much harder because everybody's getting into it, and there's a ton of talented people. Where holy crap, I think I saw like college students starting out. They're 2 years into 3D in college at like what 18 years old, 19 years old, and they're creating stuff that would make veterans like open their like drop their jaw from how amazing their work is. But at the same time, it's like it's a challenge of each generation, right? You go into something, you're starting out, your goal is to be the best. And seeing other people who are amazing at art kind of just wants to make you go harder, Be the like, oh, you're all my rivals. I'm gonna have to like match you guys. And then, yeah, that's how the industry grows. That's how the industry goes forward. And hopefully, one day, maybe I can be one of those guys who are like, oh, damn, you make great art.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, yeah, I remember when I started out, I was like really, really, looking into some people which were ahead of me, like doing
Yeah.
better stuff. And I thought, I think it's common, like, being young and thinking that, well, sometimes, you have this little bit of this, I don't know how to call it, like the courage of the young, and
Mm-hmm.
the ruthlessness that you don't really care what people think, and you're bold enough to like claim that you can do everything, like, and some
Mm-hmm.
things like take time, and sometimes it's really true, because you just have you have the potential, and you just dig in, like, fully in, you don't have yet the obligations of the older age and stuff, and you can do much more in these terms.
Yeah.
But I remember there was also this feeling of, you know, being overwhelmed that, you know, the people who are ahead of me, like older people or more experienced people, they just do stuff that I am not able to achieve, like the level of art they're doing. And it's still the case to, you know, there's always someone ahead of you, or like someone that you can think that's better than you, even if you're kind of on the top of the world, I guess. You probably look at people that are doing a little bit different stuff than yours, maybe some stuff that you wish you had experience in. Or, you know, I remember one of my professors, which was he was an art historian, and he was like a very specialist guy in one of the painters of medieval age, and he was like one of the top, I don't know, European specialists in this area, but there was someone better, like someone. And it was like so hard for him, right? Because, you know, there was this one guy that's more specialized or having better, I don't know, opinions, and he took it very hard. So and what I meant is it's good to be patient, so to speak, because over time you always like gain experience. You succeed and you fail, and you learn from both of these, like, I think, and you get, you know, your knowledge behind your belt. And it's like you said about working in 3D like last time we spoke, like that you have experiences of starting out and learning stuff along the way, and the expectations were higher, so you had to learn, you know, you had to get criticized for what you're doing wrong, and then take it in and change, adapt. So being younger, I think, is like a little bit easier to adapt, right? Then later on, when you have, you know, your muscle memory, so to speak, and you're probably learning a little bit slower. But then again, you have, you know where to search, you know.
I guess that's kind of like the advantage of being a younger dude, or starting out. It's like, if I screw up, please don't get mad at me, because I'm still new. You know, compared to like maybe an older experienced person, like 10 or 15 years into the industry, and they make basic mistakes, it's gonna look really bad, right?
Yeah, but you still do. You know, you still do basic mistakes sometimes, you know.
Yeah, hopefully less compared to like as a beginner, like, you know, flip normals, you know. What else? Small stuff like that.
Yeah, but when you look at as we talked about directors, you know, some people, you know, do their great work, and the more great work you produce, the expectations were higher. And you know, it's sometimes, you know, you did 5 genius movies, and then the 6th one is the challenge, because, you know, all the people are expecting that the 6th one will be at least as genius as the last 5 ones, but it's not always the case. You have to always be prepared to do the failure the next time, right? I mean, that must be hard, you know, being a genius and then going down.
There's always room for like every kind of person, right? Like, not everybody is meant to be a director. Not everybody is meant to be the superstar. You know, not everyone can and should take it. So I feel like there's always gonna be a room for, like, okay, you are a cog in the machine, and that's perfectly fine. You know, you don't have to be a superstar. It's perfectly fine contributing to a bigger piece of work.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, it's like those movies that we are kind of like admiring, and usually you remember a few names associated with the creation, and there's this whole, you know, team that's. I sometimes really like to watch the end titles in a movie, just searching for the names I recognize or not. You know, mostly I don't, but I'm really also sometimes just looking at the names, how they sound, you know, from different cultures, different countries and stuff. And you see a movie that there was such a big team of people involved in it, and they just get this final credits right at the end of the movie. So that's all the glitter and fame that they get to know, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of sad, but at the end, it's just that's how it is, right? Someone's in the foreground and the other ones
Mm.
are just backing it up.
There's a certain happiness to it though. Like, sure, your name is stuck to a credits roll, like maybe a 1 second piece of film at the very end, but there is something comforting where you could be dead already, maybe 100 years from now, and people are still looking at that film
Mm-hmm.
that or your game that you worked on, and they'll see your name there, right? Like, you're not around anymore, but in a certain way, working on a big production is the closest thing an artist can get to being immortalized, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like artworks, like for example, like NFTs or certain artworks online or on ArtStation. Quite honestly, they're really great, but nobody's gonna be talking about them 100 years from now, compared to like certain games or film where it's been I mean, we still talk, people still analyze films and VFX and all kinds of things from stuff from like 100 years ago, and everybody there in the credits are probably dead, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, they worked on it. They're a small cog in the machine to something that can transcend time, and I think there's something really comforting about that, especially as an artist, where we all want to be part of something. We all want to stamp our name into the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and I think it's a cool industry. It makes sense in all of those places, like whether it's entertainment, I don't know, or more practical businesses. If you do, I don't know, medical visualizations, whatever you
Yeah,
do with
yeah,
3Ds, like it's a useful tool, and it's yeah,
yeah,
I think it has its own meaning, so to speak.
yeah, for
And
sure.
I guess for younger or older generations, there the technology is really advancing, and I think in the end it's helping at least achieving bigger goals. You don't have to focus on smaller things. You can take a look at the bigger picture sometimes.
Yeah,
I think all this civilization advances in providing us with more free time to do stuff that you don't have to I don't know, wash the dishes. You have the washing machine
mm-hmm.
and stuff like that. Everything is like kind of trying to free us from having to work on the necessary parts, but tedious, so that
Yeah,
you have time to just watch the world, contemplate on it, right? Think about
yeah,
it. You meet with people you love, right? And that's also why you don't really have to. Although Marco always says that it's kind of like this coffee ritual that you play, put on a render and go make yourself a coffee.
mm-hmm.
Uh, but right now you just can render really fast with all those advancements, and also like the services are as ours, right? Like Garage Farm.
Mm-hmm.
You can just send off the renders, and they will render somewhere on the cloud, and they get downloaded ready, and your computer is free, right?
Yeah,
For doing what you really want to do with your computer, not just
yeah.
wait
Go
for
on YouTube, watch videos. Yeah, scroll
right.
Facebook. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the most advanced ways of spending free time. So,
yeah. Please use a render farm like garagefarm.net so that you can spend more time on Facebook.
or do something really meaningful, like create your short movie that you promised yourself you will do this year. It's already April. What have you done to what have you done to achieve your goals?
It's been a year. Where have you been? Yeah.
Right, right.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we can on
Mm-hmm.
that inspiring and calling to action note, we can
Yeah.
end this episode and wish you all happy rendering.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, see you.